Hi there, this is S.J. Thomason with Truth Matters, and today we're going to discuss some more really interesting information about the Shroud of Turin, which I firmly believe is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. I am going to share with you some mind-blowing evidence, some mind-blowing thoughts from numerous scholars who've studied the Shroud of Turin extensively. It's the most studied religious relic there is in the world, and for good reason, because it is touch the divine. So here's what Jared Stout, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other things. I'm going to match up some Bible passages with the shroud. We're going to talk about whether we should expect to have found the shroud, and we're going to talk about what ancient Jewish burial practices are and some other evidence on the shroud of that dates it back to the 1st century AD. In the year of our Lord. And so Jared Stout said this in 2024, examining the flow of blood on the figure's head as it wraps around the sides and contemplating how the image seems to have been impressed when the cloth was flat, he realized the image does not show a man laying flat. He had photographed a bearded model, both standing up and laying down to trace out the blow of flood. And the shroud matched the upright model in many ways, including the posture and the way the light interacted with the face. Then something hiding in plain sight became apparent. The figure's hair falls downward, not back, which would bunch up if laying down flat. And yet the figure is not standing because we see his feet crossed and arms still folded. For the hair to be flowing downward and the other signs such as posture and lighting, he match up. He must have been upright through other means. Welcome, Alexis Carroll. Great to see you. So here's what was said by Gilbert Lavoie in 2023. I must admit that I was overwhelmed with the discovery of the upright man. It caused me to back out of the room in awe and respect for what the image of the man of the shroud was visually telling me. My first thought was that indeed this image is a reflection of the moment of his resurrection. It was a moment in direct contrast from all that I previously understood. Prior to that moment, I thought there was nothing on the shroud that could visually reveal that this man's image was a reflection of his resurrection. And this comes from the Shroud of Jesus and the sign John ingeniously concealed. Here's what else. Here's what this matches up with. This comes from John 23-9. So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going towards the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus's head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. What did he believe? He believed that the Jesus of Nazareth had risen from the dead. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Here is the image, and you can see that there were hundreds of marks, unfortunately, from the terrible beating that Jesus took. Here's what John Jackson said in 1990, and a lot of scholarship today has been built on this foundation. 1, the body image is well resolved. Features as detailed as the lips can be discerned. 2, the body image penetrates into the cloth to a depth of no more than a few fibrils and is restricted to crowns of the threads. The body image fibrils are individually colored, and the coloring does not follow the bends or crevices associated with the intersecting threads of weave. In addition, there is no cementation of fibrils or added pigment responsible for the macroscopic image color. The intensity of the frontal body image correlates globally with expected separation distances between an assumed body and enveloping cloth. This correlation is independent of implied body surface composition. In other words, skin, hair, etc. 4, there are no obvious side images surrounding the frontal and dorsal body images. You guys got this image on the front and the back of this large cloth, and between the two heads on the front and the back side of the head. 5, the body image is due chemically to a molecular change of the cloth cellulose, in particular, a conjugated carbonyl structure associated with dehydration. 6, the red image stains are composed of blood and or blood-derived substances. 7, if the shroud is draped naturally over a body shape lying in the supine position, the frontal body image aligns vertically over corresponding features of that body. And 8, the maximum intensity of the frontal and dorsal images are nearly equal. Okay, dorsal's the backside. Okay, so we've got the pretty neat stuff. And here's what John Jackson said he came up with. He said, thus the hypothesis of a collapsing cloth onto a radiating body appears to explain all known characteristics of the shroud image and makes certain testable predictions, some of which have yet to be verified. I have endeavored to show that this hypothesis arises strictly from considerations of specific image characteristics. The major problem with the hypothesis is, of course, to explain why a human body would behave in such a manner. Pretty neat stuff. Here's how you can see the body, the front and the back. Here's an image of it and how it actually is sort of in a three-dimensional format. So here is also what was said about it. So this is from Antonacci in 2012. Beginning with Giles Carter and continuing with Dr. John Jackson, Dr. August Aceta, and Dr. Alan Wanger, and Professor of Anatomy Michael Blunt, skeletal features such as finger bones, bones extending over the palm, part of the skull at the forehead, the left thumb, parts of the backbone, and even teeth have been indicated on the man of the shroud. Each of these scientists, physician, and longtime experts on the shroud concluded that only radiation could have encoded such internal features on the cloth. And while these experts may vary somewhat in the particular form of radiation involved, all have concluded that only radiation projected from the body could have encoded the man's skeletal and dental features. Alexis Carrel says certain folks think that Paul wrote little about Jesus' life, teaching, and death, even though he was writing letters, not biographies, and he talked about the crucifixion repeatedly, I should say. Yes, very true. So did the Jewish scriptures prophesy the crucifixion? And what did they say about the crucified man? Well, yes, they did. If you take a look at the Wisdom of Solomon, you have this is how the Jewish people, this was before the Pharisees had done what they did in calling for Jesus' crucifixion. It says this in the Wisdom of Solomon 2:12-20. And some people don't know this because it's in the deuterocanonical books and it's not in the Protestant Bible, but it's a fascinating little phrase here. Let us lie in wait for the righteous man because he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions. He reproaches us for sins against the law and accuses us of sins against our training. He professes to have knowledge of God and calls himself a child of the Lord. He became to us a reproof of our thoughts. The very sight of him is a burden to us because his manner of life is unlike that of others, and his ways are strange. We are considered by him as something base, and he avoids our ways as unclean. He calls the last of the righteous happy and boasts that God is his father. Let us see if his words are true, and let us test what will happen at the end of his life. For if the righteous man is God's son, he will help him and will deliver him from the hand of his adversaries. Let us test him with insult and torture, that we may find out how gentle he is and make trial of his forbearance. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to what he says, he will be protected. Ooh, interesting. What else do we have? Well, we knew that from Daniel 9, I'm not going to read all of this, but Daniel 9:24-27, I highly recommend you take a look at, because Daniel predicted that 77's less 7, or 483 years after the call to rebuild Jerusalem, which occurred in both 444 and 457. And so in that window of time, we're told we wait about 483 years. It brings us to a window of time around the time Jesus was crucified, which is in 33 AD. And it says in Daniel 9, it says, an anointed one shall be cut off. He should put an end to sacrifice and offering. Okay, so we know that that was going to happen, this 77's less 7. We also know from Psalm 31 that Jesus portended the way that he would be treated. He says, because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have been forgotten, like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel. For I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. And he said in Psalm 22, but I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by all people. And all who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Hold on one second. Hey, come on. That's a little pooch there. Okay. And then he says this: many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open their wide mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. For dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. Now remember, Jesus at the cross and people encircling him at the foot of the cross. He says, they have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. Remember that Psalms was written about 1,000 years before Jesus even walked the earth. And so he was portending that he was going to be crucified, which hadn't even been invented yet. It wasn't invented until the Persians came around the 6th century before Christ. And the Romans perfected that is making it incredibly cruel. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them. For my clothing, they cast lots. They did that to Jesus. Okay. Giulio Fanti in 2024 showed us an image of what Jesus, what had gone through. And you can see in this image that we can see that he was marked many, many times. And he also had been pierced as right under his chest bone. So we also see that happening. And some people have argued that, no, it can't be Jesus. His hair was longer in the back. Well, yes, his hair was longer in the back, but also Leviticus 19:27, you shall not round off the hair on your temples or mar the edges of your beard. So many Jewish people today, Orthodox Jews, have longer hair. Isaiah 56 says, I gave my back to those who strike and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. I hid my face from disgrace and spitting. Okay, so we knew that from Isaiah. Now, what's interesting on that is that his beard in the shroud, you can see that they had pulled at his beard. And so, behold, my servant shall act wisely. He shall be high and lifted up and shall be exalted. As many were astonished at you, his appearance was so marred beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of the children of mankind. So shall he sprinkle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which has not been told them, they see, and that which they have not heard, they understand. All right, so we have that going on. Here is the image again, just to warn you. Now, you can see right here, the beard had been sort of plucked at. You know how painful that could be? Now, I don't grow a beard. I'm a female, but I can imagine it would be pretty painful to have people pulling at your beard. Okay, and you can also see the way that the photographic image, the negative of it is what we can see more clearly. And we saw from Isaiah 53, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was a chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. And we, like sheep, have gone astray. We turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Pretty fascinating stuff. He also was buried by Joseph of Arimathea, and it was predicted in Isaiah 53:8 that he would be buried by the rich, with the rich in his death. And in Isaiah 53:11, he would see the light of life. Okay. And all right. So that was what happened. He bore the sin of many and made transgression for the transgressors. You can also see in this image more on the hematology case reports and reviews. This is the dorsal image of the right shoulder and head. So you've got some other scourge marks. And this was a fulfillment of Matthew. Now, on his head, there was thorns. Now, what man can you think of in history was crowned with thorns and crucified? And the crown wasn't as they depict oftentimes as a little ring around his head. Instead, it was like they took a bush, crumpled it all together, and stuck it on his head. And so they predicted that. And they also were mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spit on him, all predicted. Okay. So they crucified him, as Matthew 27 said. They divided his garments among them, casting lots. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now. Hearken back to what I showed you already in Wisdom of Solomon. The exact same thing that was predicted happened in Matthew 27. The exact same thing. And of course, he was pierced. His side was pierced with a spear, and there came out blood and water. And of course, we have the evidence from the shroud that his side was pierced. Okay, so we have that evidence. Now, here's what the image could look like. What do you see right here? Now, of course, you can see all of these scourge marks. People have counted those up, quite a few. So Alexis says certain folks also think Paul's teaching on Jesus was different from that of the disciples, despite Paul talking about the Last Supper. Yeah, Paul is quite consistent. Paul was obviously the last one to see Jesus, but he's also considered an apostle of Jesus. Now, was Jesus's burial consistent with Jewish burial practices and blood? Yes. His body, according to Deuteronomy 21, his body shall not remain all night upon a tree, but you shall bury him that day, for he is hung as a curse of God. So Jesus took on the curses or the sins of humanity and was hung on a tree, essentially on wood, on a wooden cross. And the Mishnah Sanhedrin 6 says, if God suffers such distress over the blood of the wicked that is spilled, even though they justly deserve their punishment, it can be inferred a fortiori that he suffers distress over the blood of the righteous. And the sages said not only this, that an executed transgressor must be buried on the same day he is killed, but they said that anyone who leaves a deceased relative overnight without burying him transgresses a prohibition. So, in other words, he was buried on the same day. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus took him down and helped him. They were both Pharisees, but they had converted. They understood Jesus to be who he was. In the Jewish burial practices of Tahara, it says the ritual cleansing of a deceased body before burial. Then the body is anointed with spices and oils before being wrapped in a white linen shroud. During Jesus' time, Jews often purchased expensive shrouds, but Gamaliel asked for a less expensive shroud upon his burial, which many embraced after that. Now, the shroud itself was a very expensive linen cloth. It didn't have cotton in it. There's little cotton portions now at the edges that was coming from medieval times when people wove that in as the shroud had been handled quite a few times and through the centuries. And the Talmud Seferio said, although he was rich, and this is talking about Gamaliel. Now, you know, that's the same Gamaliel that shows up in Acts and says, if not to hurt Peter, to let them go, because if their mission is of God, will not be destroy that. You'll be fighting against God. And of course, that's exactly what happened. The mission was from God. And that's why by 313 AD, between 5 and 6 million people were following Jesus, despite no legal protections. And so Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, according to John 19:39. And Mark 16:1 says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they could go and anoint him. And that was a fulfillment. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own tomb, which he had cut in the rock. As you saw, that came from Isaiah, that he was going to be buried with the rich. And of course, he was. And then Luke 24 also reports the linen. It says he saw the linen cloths by themselves. This is Peter, and he went home marveling at what had happened. It also points out the spices. So all of this is consistent with what they're finding on the shroud today. Here's again some more images of the shroud. So it's really fascinating stuff. Now, according to a professor of botany named Dannon, says the authenticity of the Near East as the source of the Shroud of Turin is completely verified to me as a botanist through the images and pollen grains of Gandalia tourneforti and the images of Zygophyllum demosum leaves. Other important botanical findings, such as the images of some 200 fruits of 2-3 species of pistachia and the reed Arundo donax, will be described and illustrated by photographs. Using my database of more than 90,000 sites of plant distribution, the place that best fits the assemblage of the plant species, whose image and pollen grains have been identified on the shroud, is 10 to 20 kilometers east and west of Jerusalem. The common blooming time of most of these species is spring, which would be March and April. Very consistent with what we found with Jesus. We also have blood consistencies. Here's what Giulio Fanti said in 2024. Now, he counted how many blood stains, 372, numerous blood stains scattered throughout the double body image of the Shroud of Turin show evidence that Jesus of Nazareth was tortured. Blood-stained marks all over the body image, which are consistent with pre-crucifixion flagellation, blood-stained marks on the head that are consistent with a crown of thorns, blood marks on the hand and feet that are consistent with a post-mortem wound that corresponds with the post-mortem spear wound that Christ received as is described from the Bible. So I just wanted to give you some more inspiration and reasons to believe in the Shroud of Turin and its authenticity. Here is what was also said by Raymond Schneider, Bridgewater College. Here's what it says. In 1978, the stirrup scientists detected dirt on the nose, knee, and heel using reflectance spectrometry. Subsequently, it was classified as a form of travertine aragonite, a rare limestone identical to that found in Jerusalem. So really good stuff. Solid reasons to believe in the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. I hope you enjoyed this presentation today. If you do like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.